Yay, I'm live. Great. So, hi, good morning in the UK. Namaste. Welcome. Here we go. This is day one of my road to rapture. So let me just say hi and introduce myself to anyone who's watching. I'm Shakti Sundari. I'm a priestess of love and sacred sexuality, a teacher of embodied awareness and awakening for women. And over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be going live every morning here on my page, speaking about my road to rapture. And this is all tied in with the launch of my book, Rapture, A Guide to Sexual and Spiritual Awakening for Women, which is launching and going on sale on October the 9th, so in 3 weeks' time. So basically over the next 3 weeks, every weekday morning at 9, I'm going to be doing a live that takes you through basically my journey in 2 ways really. My journey of sexual and spiritual awakening, and my journey of writing this book, Rapture. So today's live is called, it's a really long title, so I might have to look at my notes to remember what it's called. Seeds of Bliss, Erotic, Innocence. What's the next bit? Literary Eloquence, and The Split. So yeah, I guess in today's live, I want to go right back to where I can find the origins, the source, the seed of who I've become and what I do and this work, my vocation in life as a teacher of embodied awareness and sexual and spiritual awakening for women, and how that's evolved, you know, because there's this direct parallel. So going right back to the source, to the seeds, to the origins of that, and also in parallel to that, my passion for writing and my gift for writing, which has also always been with me from the very beginning. And then I just also want to say, like, this book has been a long time coming, no pun intended, well, maybe a pun intended. I was trying to figure out when I first started to write this book, and I actually can't remember exactly, but I think it was somewhere between 6 to 8 years ago, at least 6 to 8 years ago. So it's been a while birthing, and as I go through these lives over the next 3 weeks, you'll get an insight into that whole journey of writing the book in those years and what transpired during the course, and all the kind of synchronicities and unfoldings and setbacks along the way. So thank you for being here and joining me. Thank you. So let's just dive in. Going back to the very beginning, going back to the seeds of all of this, to the seeds of what rapture is for me and how it unfolded in my life. So I go right back to almost my earliest memories, actually. One of my first memories was when I moved to live in Germany with my family. So we left the UK. I was born in the UK, but we moved to Germany when I was 3. And so I grew up in Germany. And my early childhood memories of life there are really quite idyllic, you know. We lived in this beautiful big house right on the forest. So the forest behind our house, it was just, I used to leap over my back garden fence and go into the forest and play by myself or with my friends. And that was my life. My life was free. You know, there was no watches, there was no mobile phones, there was no sense of fear of being out in the world on your own as a young child. I was out in nature, playing, being with the seasons, being with the animals, deer, squirrels. I had this fantasy that there were wolves in the forest, but I'm not sure that there were. And then there was a lot of farmland around, so cows, donkeys, horses, sheep, all of this was part of my growing up. It was idyllic. It was very intimate with nature, and I was very free. And in the German culture as well, there was a much more, of course I didn't know this at the time, but there was a much more liberal attitude to the body, to nudity and to sexuality than in the UK. This is something I only realised when we moved back to the UK. So I grew up in an environment where getting changed in the changing room. So I grew up playing a lot of tennis, being very athletic, and in the changing rooms with my mum, all the women just stripped off, naked, standing there talking like it was the most natural thing in the world. And of course it is. So that was how I grew up. Nudity was natural. It wasn't anything weird or kinky or perverse, you know, and also my family wasn't religious, which also I think was a blessing, you know. So I grew up with nudity as natural, the body as natural, nature as intimate. And quite often when I went into the forest, I would sometimes take my clothes off. And then as developing young, innocent girl, I would explore my body with my friends. We would do things that would be now seen as sexual, but for us it was just an innocent exploration of our bodies and what felt good, right? This is what children naturally do when there's no moral strictures around what's right and what's wrong. So this was also part of my growing up, and actually I would often take the lead in this kind of thing. So I had somehow this innate erotic drive to explore the body, to explore pleasure, to explore sexuality in a very innocent way. There was no external influence upon that, as far as I am aware and was aware, that would be driving that, other than the natural flow of eros within me. I danced, I sang, I painted, I ran, I cycled, I created in nature. This was my youth, my pre-teenage, my pre-pubescent youth. And so for me, this is the memory of eros in its most innocent, natural expression, untainted by moral strictures and judgments and imposed notions of right and wrong and good and bad or sinfulness. And I think I was very blessed to have that experience. And then we returned. Oh, and also one more thing I guess I would want to bring in there is that, of course, well, not of course, but I was always writing. So from my earliest years, I kept a diary, I kept a journal, I wrote, and writing was my way, one of my ways, my most natural ways of expressing, of reflecting, of making meaning, of writing stories. So this was something that I did from my earliest years as well. I've got stacks and stacks and stacks of journals and diaries that go right back through my life. Then, just as I was coming into puberty, we moved back to the UK. And it was a really big culture shock to move from that to a suburban town in the UK and to a culture that was much more old-fashioned and repressed sexually. It was a shock. Also much more gender defined in terms of masculine and feminine. So just to give you an example, I attended the local junior school for about the last 6 weeks because we moved back just before, you know, that I would start grammar school. And I'd been used to wearing whatever I wanted to school. I'd been used to, it was a very progressive school I attended in Germany. I was used to being encouraged to debate with the teacher, to debate with the headmaster, actually. He always encouraged us to question things, to ask, to debate, to try and prove him wrong. So that's what I was used to. And then I came back to the educational system in the UK, where I wasn't allowed to ask questions, I wasn't allowed to answer back, I wasn't allowed to stand up for myself. And here's one really key memory that I have. I went to school wearing my favorite jeans and my favorite red t-shirt, which had, you know, the Rolling Stones. I actually didn't even know who they were, but I had a t-shirt with the tongue on it on the front. And my teacher called me to the front of the class and she said, "You can't wear jeans to school And I said, why? Of course, because I was used to asking questions. And the teacher said, because you're a girl and girls have to wear skirts. I kid you not. This was in, hang on, 1971, 72, I think, in the UK. So I was told I couldn't wear trousers to school. It wasn't about the fact that they were jeans, because I was a girl. So there is the conditioning, there is the programming right there about repressing the feminine and repressing the free expression of my true nature, which is a repression of Eros. I went back and spoke to my parents and I was like really pissed off. But my parents supported the authority of the school, as is the way we've all been trained to do, right? To support the authority, supposed authority, rather than to support our children. That's the old-fashioned programming, which is leaving this world as we speak. And so then also everything changed, not only because of the culture shock of coming back to this very repressed, old-fashioned culture as I perceived it, also like, so then I went to grammar school, an all-girls grammar school, and there I was stripping off in the changing rooms and looking around, and everyone was staring at me, and they were all like getting changed underneath their shirts and being really embarrassed and shy about their bodies. And I was like, guys, what's wrong with you? It's just a body, right? And, you know, none of us were developed even at that point. So it was kind of funny. So there were these sharp disparities between what I'd been used to and the culture I moved into. And then even more disparity, and this is what I'm calling the split. My parents began to argue, and this is all relevant, by the way, you know, our conditioning, both society and culture, as well as personally, family origins, is really pertinent to how we grow and evolve sexually and spiritually. So my parents began to argue. It was a very dysfunctional, unhappy marriage. And I have a sister, but I was in the role of the mediator between my parents from the age of 12 or 13 onwards, and listening to both my father moan about my mum, listening to my mum moan about my dad, seeing my dad as the archetypal patriarch, dominating, controlling, bullying, angry, aggressive, shouting, dominating, and my mum as the victim, as the pathetic, disempowered, weak, suffering, the woman. So both immature expressions of masculine and feminine, right? Completely that very dysfunctional dynamic, and they were playing that role perfectly. So that's what I grew up with. In that environment, there was no space for me. There was no space for my feelings, my needs, my self-expression. There was no space for that. And anything that came through as an authentic expression of my being was violently slapped down by my father, or, you know, physical corporal punishment, or verbal aggression and shouting. So a lot of squashing down of my natural life force expression, right? And then, of course, at the same time, my sexuality came online. I began to bleed. And of course, with that, the dawning of erotic feelings, desire and longing. And simultaneously, my spiritual longing came online. Meaning, what is the meaning of life? Why am I here? Who am I? All of those philosophical questions like rushing in all at once at menarche. And so in this kind of crucible of dysfunction, of, yes, I would almost also say trauma, and this search for meaning, and this burgeoning sexual desire and this sexual energy rising up, here was the melting pot, the seeds for me of my undoing, and then my eventual becoming, right? I'm kind of feeling I'm feeling sad as I speak to that, actually. I'm feeling sad for her, for my teenage self, really like feeling her pain and her anguish, I feel her sense of abandonment, her aloneness, nobody to talk to, nowhere to go, no one to listen, no one to support, no one to champion, right? I'm really feeling right now as I speak about her, yeah, so sad and so much grief for her. And though of course I've processed this many times, it's just coming up as I speak. So then what happened for me in this quest again, and this split that was beginning to take place in my psyche and in my body and in my sexuality, I walked to the end of the road, literally, the road that we lived on, to the church at the end of the road, and it just so happened to be a Baptist church. I walked in on a Sunday morning. I was about 13 or 14 and asked if I could go in, and sat down at the back. And I began to go and I became a Christian. I became a Baptist. There was no religion in my family whatsoever. But I had this yearning for God. I had this yearning for meaning. I had this yearning for something beyond the everyday of life. I needed to find something beyond myself to sustain and support me. And of course, looking back now, I understand that was also the search for the unconditional love that I wasn't getting in my home environment. I found love in the form of the congregation. There were some very beautiful things about that. However, there was also the conditioning and the programming that came with that sex was sinful before marriage, that alcohol was sinful because Baptists don't drink alcohol, and that people who were not Christian went to hell. So that's pretty harsh programming that went along with the love of God and Jesus and the love of the congregation in the church. So all of that began to infuse and imprint into my body and into my system. And at the same time, I had this huge sexual drive. And I discovered my dad's pornography and my parents' sex toys. And some of that pornography, most of it was actually books rather than magazines. Most of it was pretty hardcore. And so here I was, this teenager with this complete split on the face of it. A high-achieving academic, brilliant at almost everything, great at sports, great at science, great at arts, great at art, a leader, the prefect, all of those things. A Christian, went to church every Sunday, doing voluntary work in the community as a good person, which was also sincere, I've got to say. I loved doing that voluntary work. And then, under the covers, at night, or when when my parents weren't there, reading the pornography, masturbating like crazy, getting lost in fantasies. The split. The sex and spirit split. The split between good and bad. The split between right and wrong. The guilt, the shame, the self-judgment, all because of this environment. And I wonder how many people watching can relate to that. Just going to look at my notes for a minute and see if I've missed anything out. Yeah, I think that's it really that I wanted to share today about the seeds. So the seeds of bliss, erotic innocence, literary eloquence, and then the split. Again, I feel sad as I feel back into those times in my life. And I almost feel like crying actually. One of the reasons I've written this book is for that part of me, and that part of any woman or any girl out there now who is experiencing now that split in their lives, or is still experiencing the long-lasting effects of that kind of wounding, trauma and separation from their bodies, from their sexuality, and from spirituality as something that is not about a Father God Redeemer in the sky who's going to reward you for being a good girl. All of this programming has had to go from my body, my mind, and my system, you know, and it's taken me the last 18 years. And in fact, I would say it's never 100% complete. There are always more layers of undoing, more layers of letting go, more layers of freeing up space within who I am now from all of that false conditioning, programming that has set up this very, very common, I would say it's endemic, I would say it's in everyone until they do the inner work, the split, which is designed to separate you from God or source or divinity, whatever you want to name it, which is inherent in your being and in all of life. There is no need to go to a God, outside to go to a church, outside to go to a priest, outside to know this. And it's designed to separate you from your pleasure, your erotic innocence, the purity, the beauty and the divinity of your holy desire and sacred sexuality, which is the source of your true being. It's the source of your power. It's the source of your wisdom. And this is what I've had to discover. And this is one of the reasons I was moved to write this book. So, tomorrow I feel really tearful. Tomorrow I'm going to carry on sharing a little bit more, and tomorrow I'm going to speak about the first time that I had sex and what that was like. And I'm not sharing this to titillate, right? It is not about trying to turn you on or, you know, be, what's the word? I can't even, sort of salacious. It's really about sharing from a very authentic and vulnerable place the journey of one woman's sexual and spiritual development. So you really get to see, hear and understand, relate and resonate with what it's about. And you get to understand, man or woman, that sex isn't a dirty little secret. It is a fundamental aspect of your human beingness. It is innately divine and perfect and immaculate, and it is connected to every single aspect of your life. It is not separate from it. Every aspect of your life, every aspect of your being, your psyche, your body, your emotions, all of it, it is not separate. It is one with all. And again, I haven't got my book in front of me. There's a spiral on the cover because it's all connected. So join me tomorrow as I speak about the first time I had sex. And if you would like to be a part of the book launch, just a reminder, I've got a Rapture book launch Facebook group that you can request to join. It's free, and there's going to be on the 9th, when the book is going on sale, I'm going to be offering a whole day, all day online launch event with free classes, with special guests, with book readings and with prizes and competitions. So that's on the 9th. And when I've finished, I'll put the link to that group underneath in the comments. What do I also want to say? Oh yeah, a couple more things. There is a course that goes with the book. It's called Rapture. And the next third live round of this course is starting on Thursday, the 28th of October. I'll put the link for that below as well. And if you have questions, if you have comments, if you have reflections about your own experience, if what I've spoken about has triggered, something for you, then feel free to share. All of these videos will be uploaded into the Rapture book launch Facebook group. And if you want to approach me about working with me in some way, then message me here or go to my website, shaktisundari.com. I think that's it for now. So thank you so much for being with me and supporting me as I start this journey. I'm feeling really touched and really moved by my sharing and also by your support. So thank you for being here, and so much love and appreciation. Namaste for now, and I'll see you tomorrow at 9.